For the longest time, I've really struggled with painting and color theory. But finally, after years of study and practice, during week 5 of Concept Core's 8-week summer camp, it feels like everything has finally clicked. And I'm not gonna lie, it feels fucking great. Now, maybe you're like me, where your colors have just never felt right. They never feel like they fit, harmonized, never felt correct, or maybe your brushstrokes were just really ugly, you know? But finally, after years, it feels like I've taken the first proper step to being less shit. And it feels like I'm finally understanding. So I'll talk about the techniques that I use that help me to get there. So this isn't necessarily in order of my process, but again, just random stuff I was thinking about while I was painting this week. So first is to never start with a white canvas. You should activate it with color first. Just have something there. It makes the whole painting feel so much more cohesive. And if you ever watch painters in real life, there's a reason why they often use some kind of underpaint, like orange, because it activates the canvas, and whatever future colors you put on top and mix with that orange, everything just feels a lot more cohesive. And that also ties into the second thing I was doing, which is to set yourself up for success, right? Put down your main colors first, mix within them, check how it feels, and then only use what's already on the canvas. Once you've decided, okay, these are kind of my colors, you know? Mix ahead, try them out, what feels right, and then just use within. You know, often I think in the past, I would just drag and drop colors from my color palette from out of nowhere. And of course, they never feel like they fit. But when you can let the colors literally mix, then everything starts to feel like they fit and harmonize more. Something I also value very highly is my pencil stage, which is the very beginning. Because for me, the pencil stage is my scaffold. This is when I figure everything out, my values, my composition, my structure, my everything. And you should too. Spend as much time as you need during the pencil phase. Figure everything out, you know? You don't want to be doing any guesswork later. Later, you only want to be thinking about the colors, not like, you know, the structure or where what detail goes, you know? So really figure that out. And then once I got past the pencil, then I would start to mix and just experiment with colors. Now, a thing that I've always struggled to understand, and I was taught this like 8 years ago, but again, I never really got it, was the theory that colors, obviously, you know, they feel different based on what surrounds them. This is a really shitty explanation, but yeah, colors, depending on what's around them, they feel different. Like a red will feel different when it's surrounded by orange compared to when it's surrounded by a blue. You know, that red will feel a lot cooler because it's just how our brains function and work. And I never really knew how to apply that. And it's not like I'm necessarily actively thinking about it when I was doing these paintings, but I feel like I kind of get it now, you know? When you have an underpaint and you choose the colors that you're going to use and then you mix within them, then that really gray red actually starts to feel kind of like a blue. Or that really gray blue starts to feel like a red, even though when you eyedrop it, it's actually blue, but on the page it looks like red, you know? Something like that. So I guess I kind of get that now. I don't know. But also, with each painting, yes, I did have a reference, but I wasn't trying to match the colors accurately. You know, we're artists and we can interpret reality, you know? If you want the sun to be blue, then go ahead. You know, it just has to feel right. It has to feel like everything fits. Now, this isn't necessarily a technique. It was just something I was doing throughout the week. But of course, if you're still learning, you should just try to match, you know, the photo and reality. Now, something that's also super important to painting is checking your values. You know, like just like anything, you know, have a grayscale overlay, check if your darks are good, check if your lights are good, whatever. And as long as the values are correct, then just like what I was doing before, you can honestly put whatever color you want. If your midtones are green or like this crazy purple, that's fine, as long as it all fits and harmonizes, right? That's all that really matters. But yes, check your grayscale, or check your values. Make sure your darks feel dark, make sure your lights feel light, whatever. There's plenty of mid-tone, and that's it. I often found that when I was starting, I was really scared to get really deep dark colors on the canvas. A lot of my paintings were just a lot of midtones. That's it. So it all kind of felt muddy. There's no contrast, there's no pop, there's no areas of focus. So just be less scared of using really dark colors. But also, at least for me, my highlights often was way too blown out and way too overused, because it can be really satisfying. But I think if you can restrain yourself and make sure the pops of light are using key areas, then I think your painting becomes a lot stronger. Brush economy. I'm not really sure how to say it, but just be intentional, I guess. And restrained. Every stroke should be conveying a certain type of information, whether it's the cast shadow or this little stroke here is the highlight, or whatever. Just be intentional and rely less on the blend tool as well. I found that when I was blending too much, obviously my paintings became really muddy and shit. So I think it's okay if every area is hard to find. Also, I think what a lot of people struggle with as well is, because it doesn't happen naturally on digital, is that you need to be more intentional with when you use hard edges or soft edges. It makes a huge difference. When you paint in reality, there's just layers of paint on top of each other. So naturally you get some soft edges, and then when you paint, a new brush stroke on there, then it becomes a hard edge. So then you can, control, what that looks like, basically. But on digital, kind of everything is a hard edge. So then everything can, you don't get those natural mixes between paint and stuff. So I think that's the big thing for me is, before I wasn't mixing enough or being more intentional with soft edges, I was just a lot of hard edges everywhere. And that makes an image very crispy, but also just there's no focus and it's very busy. So yeah, sorry, I'm not explaining that well, but just think about that, I guess. But also, we're all digital artists here, I guess. Use it to your advantage. After each painting, when I was like 75 to 80% done, I was going through every single slider and taking full advantage of it. Brightness slider, my hue, my midtones, shadows, highlights, whatever, color balance, just go in and just take advantage of it. I don't think you need to one-shot every single painting from the beginning. You don't have to have it all figured out. Be okay with the process being really messy and you figuring things out as you go. Oftentimes my colors are really muddy when I start, and then I have to crank the sliders to get a bit more contrast, to make my darks a little darker or whatever. And again, I think it's okay. Just take advantage of that we're using digital tools and abuse the sliders, change them, fix your painting. It's fine. You don't have to have it all figured out in one go. Now, as good as I'm feeling right now with this week, there are definitely still areas I can improve. One is that my paintings, you might have noticed, are quite monotone. They're all quite warm, and I'm trying to be more confident and pushing myself to use ranges that are further away from each other, more contrasty, because right now I feel pretty comfortable with just staying within one hue range and then going from saturation and grays, but it often makes my paintings very warm, which is, for me at least, or not warm, but like monotone, yeah, which I'm okay with, because that is a skill in itself, I think, to make a red feel like a blue, even though it's basically still red. But that is something I'm still trying to figure it out. I think I experimented a little bit with my final painting with the gouache, but or the gourd, sorry, but that's still something I got to figure out. Yeah, and I guess one final tip is that For colors, at least, I think in my previous paintings when I would start, when I was really shit, I would just go max saturation. Boom. You know, the brightest color possible, max saturation, and then put everything together. And then whenever I need a new color, I would change my hue. But I don't think that's, or that's not how I choose colors anymore, at least. I often go somewhere near the middle, start with the mid-tone, you know, something grayish to, you know, saturate, like right in the middle, and then you can build on top of it, right? Like areas of light will become a lot more saturated, and then areas of dark will become a lot more gray. But also depending on your light source, you know, if it's warm, then the shadows are often cool. So let's say I have a red object and there's a warm light casting on it, then I would move to pick the color for my shadow. I wouldn't just go that red and then, you know, make it dark. I would move towards a blue, not all the way to blue, but move like halfway between, you know, the red and the blue, and then make it a little bit more gray, and then that would be my shadow color. And that's basically how I chose all my colors. Change your on your hue slider, walk towards the color you want, and then I would just often make it more gray or more saturated depending on what I needed. So yeah, that's basically everything I was thinking of when I was painting this week. Honestly, these tips are pretty shit, but I'm feeling pretty good, so I guess that's it. But yeah, that's week 5. We were doing still lifes. 3 weeks left. That was quick. And next week is about observation painting, so even more painting, which is great. So yeah, I'll see you next week. Bye bye.